Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. Tonight, I am pleased to have Dana Gricken on. Dana, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for coming on. I believe, if I recall, I think I
Yes.
interacted with you thanks to Threads.
Yes, I've met a lot of writers on there. It's a really awesome resource.
Yeah, I think when Elon bought Twitter and
Yeah.
Facebook finally got Threads going, a lot of people jumped ship over to Threads. I
Oh
know a
yeah.
lot of authors definitely did. It's funny then because people definitely have gone back or they're doing both now, which is what I do.
Hmm.
But I think Threads is like the nicer version of social media where, at least in my opinion, it's much more supportive than
Oh yeah,
Twitter is, I think. You don't see too
for
much
sure.
political stuff, or I don't see it on Threads at least. It's much more author related. Although in my experience with Threads though, there is less, and it just could be just my experience, there's less interaction.
Yeah,
So
sometimes, yeah. I mean,
I
I've
don't
had
know.
really good interactions on there,
Good.
so yeah, that's good for social media. That's a
Awesome.
plus. Yeah,
Well, tell our listeners about yourself. Let's jump into why did you get into the wild, wacky world of writing books?
that's a really big question.
That's a loaded question.
It is, yeah. I think it's just like every other writer. You just start off writing from a really young age and just you just love to tell stories and entertain people. And you grow up and you think maybe I can do this for a living, and you just
Mhm.
decide to go after it. So, pretty
Awesome.
common story.
That is a very common story. How old were you when you first started writing those first stories, if you don't
Oh
mind
my
me
gosh,
asking?
I was probably like 6 years old, and
You
they were
were okay.
always about like aliens, outer space, like that. That was my obsession as a kid. So I'm glad I kind of grew out of that and started writing other
You
things.
started writing other things.
Yeah.
Um, when was it you got to the point when you said, I think I want to try to get some of these stories published?
Think I was about 17. I just
Okay.
graduated high school. I was in homeschooling and I kind of graduated early and I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know whether to go to college.
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on, but I know that I love writing and I really love to give this a shot. So that was pretty much the age when I started down the whole publishing path.
And did you, for those that are listening and stuff, which direction did you go? Did you want to do traditional publishing? Were you looking at smaller publishers, or did you think about self-publishing?
I really wanted traditionally like to be published, and I was looking at agents and I was just getting rejections just left, right, and center. And as a
Mhm.
17-year-old, that was pretty intense. Of like I
Yeah.
didn't know that was normal. So I was like, maybe I'm just a bad writer. And I so I kind of
Well,
just gave
you're
it up.
probably a good writer is the problem. That's
Thank you. So I kind of gave up trying to get representation for a little while and just
okay.
focused on the writing. And then all of that stuff came later. So I'm glad I stuck with it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really intimidating when you get started and especially in your experience, because you started when you were younger. For me, I did not even finish my first novel till I was 35,
Okay. Yeah.
36. I was 36 when I finished my first novel.
Okay.
I wrote for years. I wrote in
Yeah.
college, I wrote out of college, I wrote when I got married, had kids, but
Mhm.
my story behind it was I never finished anything.
Okay.
So I've talked about it in the podcast before. I have this folder called books on the computer that we're talking on right now.
Mhm.
And I have one called old books. And old books is just folder after folder of all these stories I started.
Oh
And
no, we never finished.
the only common thread is I never finished them.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of, I don't know if it was what was going on in life or whatever it was, whatever my excuse was at the time. I just always would kind of jump to the next thing. And I would
Hmm.
never go back and finish the last thing. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was around 35 that I think I was going through an early midlife crisis. And I said, man, what do I want to do? And I said, man, I've always wanted to just complete a full novel. Not a
Yeah.
short story, not a novella. I want to complete a full novel. So it took me a while to plan it out basically, but that's when I basically got to that point of like, okay, let's actually start this thing and finish that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I did. So
Exactly. Yeah, and
And
that's always the advice I give to writers when they ask for advice. I'm always like, just finish whatever you start, because that's going to put you like miles ahead of other people who haven't finished like 10 different projects. So
Mhm.
always get to the end, no matter what.
Always get to the end. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And then I, just like with you, I went down the path of, because when I wrote the first novel, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about the publishing industry. I think if I did at that point, I probably would have picked up a guitar maybe instead. Maybe
Yeah.
I would have just gone a different. But you know what? Creative stuff is creative stuff. So I've joked that my son's a guitar player. He's 17, and I kindly remind him every now and then, you know where the term starving artist came from, right, son? He's gotten into bluegrass this past year pretty heavily, and
Oh, that's
very
cool.
supportive of it. It's amazing. He goes every
Yeah.
Tuesday night and plays with the group, an open mic thing down in Greenville, South Carolina. But
Cool.
I keep constantly being the annoying father to nudge him to say, you know, playing music on the side is probably extremely likely.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing for writers. Like all the
Yeah,
writers I know, this is not their full-time job. They have something completely different, pays the
yeah.
bills, and this is the kind of like creative fulfillment that they do.
Right. Yeah, same thing. I do know a few full-time writers that this is how they earn a living, but
Yeah.
it is definitely the exception to the rule. I had someone on a couple month or so back, my editor actually. So my editor he kind of broke the mold in a way for a writer because he was actually successful doing it. You know,
Wow.
can't
Yeah.
see that. But his story was amazing because one of the agents that rejected him basically said, "Well, you've got this, female protagonist who I think her name is Sarah Roberts is the character, and I think she basically she has visions of like these crimes or what's
Okay.
happening, and
Yeah.
then she kind of helps solve these horrific murders or whatever it is,
Hmm.
something along that line. I'm probably butchering it completely, but whatever it was, the one of the agents came back and said, "This will never sell. Go write something different, basically. You'll never sell anything like this." Well, he said he takes that rejection, the most pride in that rejection, because the first book, he's wrote 37 books, I think, in that
Oh my gosh.
series for Sarah
Yeah.
Roberts now, and he's done it on just last like 15 years or something, not like a
Wow.
crazy period of time. So
Hmm.
basically a couple books a year and then some. Yeah, that first book has sold, I think, just short of 800,000 copies.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
he's already at 3 million
Crazy.
sales for the series.
That's
So
crazy.
it's like,
Yeah, I mean it just shows you that agents and publishers, they don't always know what's going to happen. So
right.
you have to really believe in yourself and your story and keep
Yeah.
going with it.
No, I think that's some of the best advice. If you don't believe in what you're doing, there's very little chance someone else is going to believe in you.
Exactly.
And definitely, and the other thing too that I try to tell people, and you've obviously learned this as well, is it's so subjective.
Yeah.
So you give it to one agent, and an agent rejects you for whatever reason. They say
Mhm.
your characters aren't believable. Okay,
Yeah.
well, the next rejection you get from an agent says, "Hey, I love your characters. They're really relatable and believable, but I don't like your pacing, or I don't like the storyline you've created." And you're just like, "Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Two
Who do I believe?
professionals that
Yeah.
represent authors, and I've got a diametrically different, reason of why they're
Yeah.
rejecting me." So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's always fun. And you never know who to believe and who to trust. So you just have to trust your story and keep going with it.
yeah. Well, I tell people I've told it for a while too, and just people I know in my personal life. I write. And it sounds, I guess, selfish in a way when it comes out this way, but I write for myself. I
Yeah.
write the things that excite me, and I can. I was writing something last night. I'm looking over my couches on the other side of all this, and I was sitting on
Mhm.
my couch and I wrote something last night, and I just laughed out loud. And I thought about it as I was doing it. First, I thought you're
Mhm.
probably crazy that you're laughing. You're in a house by yourself. My kids aren't here. I don't have them right now or anything. But that's the key of why I do it, though. If I can
Yeah.
write something and I can get joy out of it and I can find humor in it or whatever piece I put together, man, because if you don't find joy in it and if you're not enjoying what you're doing, when you go to put it out in the world, and especially if you go try to find an agent, man, are you going to be a disappointed person?
Yeah. You have to be your own biggest fan in the
Yeah,
first place, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely do.
Yeah.
So talk about putting together the first book. What did you write? And also then, when it was done, what did you decide to do with it? Which path did you take with it after the
So
rejections and all
I
that?
wrote a fantasy novel, and then
Okay.
I tried to get it traditionally published. Went agents, went indie publishers. They all said no.
Okay.
This is just not for us. And I was like, well, I still believe in this story, so I'm going to
Mhm.
self-publish it.
Okay.
And now it's sold lots of copies, and people come up to me and they say they love it. So
Hmm.
that kind of gives me the satisfaction that I did the right thing, you know. But
Yeah.
self-publishing for me was always on the table as kind of a backup of like
Hmm.
I believe in this story, so I want to put it out in the world, regardless of what other people say. Even if nobody reads it, I still enjoyed it. So
Right.
that's why I decided to self-publish it.
Okay. And in doing that, what did what were some of the things you learned? Because self-publishing is it's such an interesting thing to follow for some people, some people you and I never looked at it as a negative, but
Hmm.
I didn't go down that path until I already had and it was a small publisher, but I had a traditional small publisher
Hmm.
deal, and then that kind of went to pot. So I have a whole fun story on what can go wrong with something like that. And
Yeah.
that's the time then I at that point said, okay, well, I've got this series. What do I
Hmm.
want to do with it? And it's I by that point I had been then writing for almost 9 years, 8, 9 years. So I had kind of learned so many lessons, so many rejections. 'Cause when I finished my first book in 2014, I started querying it in 2015. And that's when I started actually learning how the business worked.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was just it's just been one learning thing after another. So I
Hmm.
needed all those steps for me to
Yeah.
be able to jump into self-publishing. And what I always tell people is, if there's nothing wrong with self-publishing, if you're
Hmm.
going to self-publish though, you want to self-publish correctly. um
Exactly.
because the worst thing
Yeah.
you can do is just throw something out there and say, well, hopefully this will pick up some readers,
Hmm.
because it won't.
Yeah.
And also that's your reputation out there. So if you do self-publish, you can't control who's going to buy it, of course. You can't control what you're going to
Hmm.
sell, but you want to put the best version of what you have out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of learned that the hard way too, of like if you rush it and it's not a good cover and there's no editing, you're not going to get really good feedback. So it's
Yeah,
in your best interest to make sure that it's the best product that you possibly can make.
right. So
Yeah.
how did you handle that? Like, what did you do, like cover wise, edits and all that? What was the lessons you learned, or how did you pursue that?
I kind of went in my own direction of I'm going to do it all by myself and
Okay.
realized that wasn't very effective. And you should take the time and find an
Hmm.
editor, find a cover designer who's gonna do it for you and make it
Right.
look professional. And I learned all those lessons the hard way for sure. Looking back now, I'm like, I kind of wish I had someone to hold my hand and tell me what to do and what not to do. But
Hmm.
I still learned and I still got here. So it was all worth it.
Yeah. Well, you have to forge your own path.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing that I've definitely learned is you can listen to lots of different people, but at some
Hmm.
point you have to make your own decision.
Exactly.
And then stand behind that decision. Now, if you start doing it and you realize, man, I did the cover myself and I probably should have outsourced it. And that's one
Hmm.
of the things that's the positive on that, especially if you do like the KDP model,
Yeah.
using through Amazon, is you can rebrand it and put new covers out.
You
You're
can.
not locked in where, okay, that is the cover, and you
Yeah.
created it in Canva and it looks like you created it in Canva and you didn't even have the pro Canva. You just had the free
Just the
version
basic.
that you couldn't get very many images or whatever else. But
Oh
um,
no.
but yeah, you do have that ability to pivot.
Yeah.
And you have to be open. You have to be open to learning, basically. But at the same
Exactly.
time, like we were saying before, you have to really stand by what you do and own those decisions.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the same in my career. Like I want to make sure all the books that I put out are me and that they represent me the way that they should. So
Hmm.
I try to take the time, find an editor, do this the right way, so everybody who reads it will know that this is me. This is something that I've made and I'm proud of it.
Hmm. Do you find is there because I saw when I was reading about one thing that I really love is that you're doing kind of a lot of everything. You've got
Yes,
poetry, you've got novella. Do you do short stories?
I do. Yes, I just
Short
released a
stories.
collection this year,
Okay,
so
you
yeah,
certainly do then. Okay.
I'm kind of all over the place. So
Do you gravitate to one thing off more than another, or is it just whatever that creative spark when that fires, that's what you go for?
Yeah, it's just wherever it takes me. And I
Okay.
think I like having that kind of career where I'm not pigeonholed into just writing fantasy or horror or
Mhm.
sci-fi. It's whatever I want to do on that specific day. And I'm grateful that I have readers that will go on that journey with me as well.
Right. And you're from Canada, correct? Or you're up in Canada? Okay.
I am Canon, yes.
So maybe that's a Canadian thing because I don't know if you know Do you know David Darling by chance?
I don't know.
Okay. So we need to connect you with David Darling because
Yeah.
and again someone that tried a very similar story where David tried for years to basically try to get agent, try to go down that
Mhm.
route and just rejection. He was like, "Man, I've got something good here," and he just dove in and went for it.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I really respect about David is he's not just sticking to one genre. So
Yes.
he's really bouncing around between fantasy. He's got one that I haven't read yet. Actually, it's funny enough. I was sitting in my house last week or something, and I get a text from him says, "Hey, present for you," and it's a picture. And so I'm looking at this picture, and I'm like, "Well, that looks like I got something mailed to me, but that's not my front door." And so
Oh
what he
no.
sent me an advanced copy of his book that's coming out later this year. It's called The
Oh,
Egyptian
that's
Enigma,
sweet.
which was
Okay.
super cool because he sent it from Canada. So obviously,
Yeah.
then you send stuff international. It's a pain in the butt.
Yes. And
I've sent a
it's so expensive too
so
to try to
expensive.
ship it. Yeah.
And so I texted him back and I was like, man, I think I know what that probably is. And that's so cool. But I'm so sad now because I don't live there. And he's like,
Oh
what?
no.
Dude, I haven't lived there in three
Oh
years.
no.
And it's also not near me. So it's not like I'm like, oh, I'll just jump in the car and drive across town.
Yeah.
I don't know who bought that house. It was a rental house for me. So I have
Okay. That makes
zero
sense.
contact with those people. It's not like anywhere near where I would go on a regular basis. And he's like, well, I said maybe they'll just put return to sender and it will show up back at your house. He goes, or maybe they'll open it up and read it. So
Maybe. Yeah.
I
Fingers
said
crossed. Yeah.
maybe, but no. So he's done the same thing with you, where he's just not been kind of pigeonholed into writing one type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's
So
fun to experiment with different genres and see for yourself what you enjoy writing the most. For
yeah,
me, it's just a good story. That's what I like. So if that happens to be fantasy, if that happens to be romance, then that's what I'm going to pursue.
yeah. So how many years ago did the first book come out?
I self-published in 2018.
2018.
So
Okay,
yeah, so
so
that's 6 years now. So
6 years. Okay.
yeah. And it's definitely I've learned a lot of lessons of like it's not an overnight success, it's more of a marathon and
Right.
it could take you years to get to where you want to be, but you have to
Mhm.
stick with it and keep writing and keep going.
Absolutely. We were talking before about, authors being able to actually make a living. The ones that probably almost without exception. There might be exception here and there, but the ones familiar with that I know their story, that have been able to quit their job and like do this full time, traditional on the traditional side, um,
Mhm.
4 to 6 books, and in the traditional world, obviously that's 4 to 6 years.
Yeah.
So it's a commitment and it's something that, and I know people that first book out 7 figure deal.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
those deals and those things really do happen.
Oh
But
yeah, for
what
sure.
I try to caution people that see that and they go, "Oh man, there's the golden egg right there." I'm like, "No, no, no. You got to remember, 1% of geese lay that golden egg.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's out there, but the chance that you're going to end up at dropping in your lap is not very
Very,
high."
yeah,
Um,
exactly. It would be nice, but yeah,
yeah,
not very likely.
not likely, but it would be nice. I think anyone that said it wouldn't be nice is fooling
Yeah.
themselves or they're not telling the truth. But that also puts a lot of pressure on you
Yeah,
because that book has to deliver.
exactly.
And if that book delivers, the publishing industry is going to expect something similar for book two. They don't want to
Yeah.
see you go sell 100,000 copies of book one and then book two sells 2,000 copies.
Yeah.
You won't have a book three.
No.
And
Yeah.
whatever name you published under, maybe it wasn't your real name, but if it was your real name, guess what? You're not using that name anymore if you can get into another publisher somehow.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of nuances to it that I don't think people really know of the publishing industry of like there's a lot of pressure to sell all of these books and perform really well
Yeah.
and that can kind of weigh on you and your creativity because it's supposed to be creative, it's supposed to be fun. So it adds
Mhm.
that kind of pressure to it that I think a lot of writers aren't expecting.
Right. And how many? So since 2018, how many? I've got a like a. I don't have a like a full list. I think it's more in line form. So how many have come out in
I
those
have
6 years?
published 11 books in that time, and then
Okay.
I have about 10 book deals that I'm currently working on with small publishers. So
Wow.
there's a lot going on
There's a
behind the
lot
scenes.
going on. That's
Yeah.
awesome though. And that should give hope to everybody because
Yeah,
you don't know what's going to happen.
exactly.
Um, the only way to prevent things from happening, in my opinion, are to not try to do them.
Yeah, just to give up. Like when I first started out, I would have killed to have 10 book deals.
Yeah.
Like looking back on it now, I'm like, when I first started in like 2015, nobody was interested. No agent, no publisher. There
Right.
were so many doors that were closed in my face. So it's like it might take a while, but you will get there. You just have to
Mhm.
keep going.
And you have an agent now, right?
Yes, I do.
How did that transpire? How did that work out?
It took a really long time and a lot of rejections, like
Okay.
300, 400 rejections, I think I was
Wow.
up to at some point. Yeah. And then I just lost count because I'm like, I can't count that high anymore. So,
Mhm.
but it took about 4 or 5 years to get an agent. And
Okay.
then I've had her about for 5 years now. So yeah,
Okay.
she's been a big help. And, she tells me these publishers are open, you can go here. And she lets me do my own deals as well. So I like
Okay.
that kind of flexibility. But yeah, no, it was a long time coming.
So, okay. So by the time you went and got the agent, you had already self-published, right?
Yes, and I'd already
Okay.
been traditionally published by an indie press at the same time too.
Okay.
So that agent kind of saw like, okay, she can sell books. Let's
Right.
just see if more of her books can sell as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. How do you decide what goes through the agent versus what you do on your own?
Sometimes it's more just a feeling of like this is really marketable versus this isn't. So maybe
Okay.
I'll self-publish this one that I don't think will find a publisher, whereas I try to give her books that I think have that marketability to it. But it's just an intuition kind of feeling at this point after so many years.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask is there only some certain genres because you write in different genres.
Yes.
So is there some that you would present and some that you wouldn't or
I'm pretty fortunate that she represents all genres.
okay.
Actually, the only thing I don't think she really does is poetry, so I did self-publish that.
Okay.
But no, all the fantasy mystery, I always send that to her, and we go back and forth, and she helps me edit. So yeah, she's been a really good resource all these years.
That is awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to find that because the agent route is so I was fortunate in one of the times I did not this person did not sign me, but I was able to spend a large amount of time with an agent. And,
Mhm,
at the end of it, I thought, okay, I mean, they really loved the idea of this story. And I
mhm.
thought, okay, this is going to be my end. This is kind of that you always got to have that break that happens for you if
Yeah,
you've been doing
of
it for a
course.
while. And no, that like 2 weeks later, man, it was really good, but here's why I'm passing. And it was just kind of one of those it was a dagger, I tell you. It
Yeah.
was a hard one to get past. And but the what I tell people all the time is, you and at some point too, the rejections do get you almost numb to them, I think.
Yeah.
I think
After
when
a
there's
while, after like 400 rejections, you're just like, yeah, whatever. It's just another email. It's just another day. Just delete, move on.
right. And
Yeah.
those are the ones that you actually hear back from. That's the other part of this, the business side of this, where you're trying to get an agent. I at
Hmm.
one point, so I tried to get an agent between 2000. I know I queried some in 2015, but it was very,
Hmm.
very few. So it was mainly 2016 to 2019, that time period. And
Yeah.
it wasn't constant. I would do it in
Hmm.
spurts, and then I would go do more writing, and then I would look for publishers. I didn't really look for any small publishers, but I looked for some larger ones that didn't require agents, and I would
Right.
query
Yeah.
some of them as well, because there are some of those out there.
Hmm.
Even some of the big publishers, Berkeley and different places, once a year they'll like kind of open it up and let
Yeah.
people without agents
Yeah.
submit
Submit.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I even tried that, and then they encourage you if they're interested in you to obtain an agent, which is
Of course.
smart. It's definitely
Yeah.
smart. I actually know someone that got an agent that way that they got in touch. It wasn't one of the big publishers, but it was Kensington, which is kind of
Okay.
like a step down. So still
Yeah.
big for sure, but just
Mhm.
not like Simon Schuster, um, um, Penguin.
Yeah.
Um, so this person got in touch with one of the editors somehow, and I don't recall now in the story of how, but somehow found the editor for Kensington. And the
Hmm.
editor said, yes, we want a contract with you, but you need an agent.
Uh,
You have to have an agent for this. So
uh,
what this author did was they actually reached out to an agent that rejected them that they were
oh,
hoping to get, and they said, hey, such and such, who everyone knows this particular editor in the like the thriller genre, such and such is willing to give me a deal, but I need an agent. And what did this agent say? Of course, I'll represent you.
what?
You just made that
Smart.
agent 15% to basically put their name on a piece of paper. You
Exactly.
landed the deal for yourself. The agent's just going to take some of the money for you,
Hmm.
which is not the normal. And so it's not a knock
No,
at
for sure.
agents.
Yeah.
But yeah, they required it. So it's funny though, the longer you do this, the more you kind of hear the stories of what people, come across and
Yeah.
what they have to face. But yeah, for me, I had a spreadsheet for all those years. And
Hmm.
because part of it too is I wanted to, there's so many agents.
There are.
One of the
Yeah.
dumbest things you can do is send the same query to the same agent, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and even do it accidentally. They'll think you're probably just trying to annoy them because they didn't respond to you or they rejected
Yeah.
you. No, it's just like there's so many agents out there. If you don't keep track of it somehow, it's very easy to just try
Just forget.
again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had like tabs. I think I still have the spreadsheet probably somewhere on the computer where I just have like
Hmm.
yearly tabs and I would make sure, okay, I'd sort it by agent name to make sure, okay, I didn't ask that agent. And I had a couple agents that I did it for multiple books. So there were a few
Okay.
agents that rejected me for one reason or another. And I said, well, I've got a different book now. And most agents are normally pretty open to if you want to query a different project,
Hmm.
they're open to that. So
Yeah, that's always a good thing too, because you kind of get a second chance a little bit to see if it's a good fit. So,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. But yeah, it's just such an interesting business. Again, I try to encourage people to get into it, but I try to also encourage them because I didn't do it myself. Of try to do your homework before you get too
Yeah.
far into it. That
For
doesn't
sure.
mean don't write your story. Write your story. Don't stop doing that because at the end of the day, to me at least, the fulfillment, that's the biggest thing you're going to get out of it. Now, maybe you'll get lots of money, maybe you'll get fame, fortune, and movie Netflix deals and all that. That happens
Fingers
to
crossed.
people. Yeah, fingers
Yeah.
crossed that happens to people. But that fulfillment of finishing that story and what lessons you learn as a human being, I
Hmm.
think those are that's the biggest reward you're going to get
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I've discovered a lot of things about myself and my personality that I don't think I would have discovered if I hadn't started writing.
if
So
you hadn't started
that was a big
writing.
plus. Yeah.
Yeah. How has it changed you as a person? Do you think from, I know obviously you've it's been several years, so you've grown, age-wise, you've grown, but how do you think it's changed you? And maybe it hasn't dramatically because you started writing so young, but
Yeah, for sure. Like it was always kind of a part of me, so I just kind of followed that.
yeah.
But you get to a point where you just step back and you see things in your personality that you keep writing and you're like,
Mhm.
okay. So I keep writing books about grief. And for me it was I lost my grandpa. So I kept writing all of these books about grief to deal with that process. And I was like, okay, I
Interesting.
see that aspect of my personality now,
Okay.
why I write so many stories with characters who are struggling with that. So it makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
So yeah, that I've definitely found that it's therapeutic for me for sure
Yeah.
over the years. I've been through a few spots in the last 7, 8 years that I couldn't write, or what I
Mhm.
did write I couldn't keep because I was just in a place where it just wasn't a good headspace to actually uh, keep the story going, I guess. But it was still good. It was still good to have that outlet. So
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you write just for yourself and it's never something you're going to show other people, but
yeah.
it just helps you get through this tough period that you're going through.
Yeah, speaking of that, because one of the things that I found, and I did it for periods of my time. I haven't done it recently, but did you ever journal?
Sometimes, yeah. As
Yeah,
as a
okay.
kid, I did most. Not really now because I write books. That's kind of like my
That's your
journaling, I
journaling.
guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, now it is. But as a kid, for sure, I was always writing down like, oh, at school today this happened, and I'm very sad. And then as I grew up, I just started writing it into books.
writing
So
the stories. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
fascinating. Yeah, because that's another interesting thing that I've tried to remind people of. They'll say, "Well, I can't write," and I was like, "Well, you ever journal?" Yeah, I journaled when I was younger. Or I've journaled in the past, and I'm like, "Guess what you've done? You've been writing."
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but that's not
Exactly.
writing a story. And I'm like, no, you're writing your own story. You're writing what's going on inside your head. And maybe that might be a really good story. You never know.
It might
Or
be. Yeah, it's just as important to do that.
Or it might not be. It might be a scary story, but then we have a a genre for that. We call that horror. So you can
Exactly.
still um
Exactly.
I'm working on a few things. So I mainly have focused the last 5, 6 books I've written have been more in the suspense, political thriller
Hmm.
genre. And I'm starting to branch out this year into I won't say horror. I don't like the term horror because I don't even know if I know how to write horror, but
Hmm.
more creepy things that I would normally write. And I
Yeah.
thought it was going to be really hard to do it, and it's not been. That's the thing. I don't know if that scares me or doesn't scare me or should it scare me, but it's like, no,
Maybe a little.
yeah. But it's another side of you. And I think as you start writing and as you start exploring things, I think that's the amazing thing to go down the path, especially you've
Yeah.
gone down that I've gone down where you're not locked into, if you get there's a beauty to getting a big publishing contract, and especially if there's a lot of, zeros at the end of the checks, then
Yeah.
you don't have to work a full-time job. Um, but there's a catch that comes with that.
Yeah.
If there are exceptions to every rule, but
Hmm.
generally speaking, if you write legal dramas, and
Yeah.
that's what gets sold to the publishing industry, well, they probably aren't going to be too excited when you say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to write a YA fantasy book." They're like,
Yeah.
John Grisham, I'm sorry, you're writing.
Yeah.
You're supposed to write
Stay in
legal
your
type
lane.
stuff. It's like, no, 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 it'll be okay. But probably a bad example because they probably tell John, sure, because your name, we could literally put
Yes.
a book out with blank pages and the like letter A on one page and a B on the
Yeah.
next page,
Someone would buy it.
and people would buy it.
Yeah.
But for the average person that, gets their foot in the door in the publishing world, it's
Yeah.
easy to kind of be typecast where,
Hmm.
okay,
Sure.
you write fantasy, guess what? And it's not just you write fantasy, it's we want a fantasy book every year.
Yeah. So
So,
there's a lot of pressure that goes with that. So that's why I kind of lean into doing traditional publishing and self-publishing because it kind of gives me the space to experiment with different genres. And it's like if I
mhm.
have a publisher that just wants my fantasy romance, then I can just self-publish horror or thriller or whatever is on my mind at the same time.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that too. Has there been any pushback from any of the publishers um, because you do both, because, and you write different
I
genres, or has it
I
been
don't
all
think
very
so,
open?
no.
No.
It's all been very open, yeah.
Okay.
They've always been really supportive and upfront and just write whatever you want and
Okay.
yeah, they've been really supportive, especially one of my publishers, Fire and Ice. They've been with me since the beginning when I was like a nobody, nobody wanted me.
Hmm.
And I can come to them and just be like, I wrote this novel and I'd love to publish it. And they're just like, yeah, sure. That's great. So
That's good.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm really lucky to have their support for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely a big deal because if you're not getting if you're getting kickback, and I guess for some publishers too, their biggest concern maybe would be they have deadlines. So maybe that would be why some of them. And I didn't face that. I don't know anyone that's faced it, but I assume for people that are not just doing a one book a year thing,
Hmm.
if you're trying to get out in a lot of different creative outlets,
Yeah,
you're more open to have some pushback from a publisher because they have deadlines, and they
they do.
have
Yeah.
and theirs are pretty like talked to a writer recently who he has been, his first book was phenomenal book, and his second book has been out. His agent had, he's on sub basically,
Hmm.
and it's been out for like 2/3 of a year. I mean, it's over half a year. I know that. A long time waiting to hear back.
Yeah,
And if he gets an answer today, hey, we're going to buy this, we want it. I'm sure there's going to be some changes recommended.
of course. Yeah.
Then the publication date for that book, I mean, probably not a stretch to say 18 months from the day
Yeah.
the deal is signed.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
something
Yeah.
that's been on submission now for more than half a year, which means it was written probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe possibly.
Yeah.
It could be 4 years before or five before it sees the light of day. So
Yeah. It takes a really long time. Yeah,
yeah,
like one of my novels that I wrote in 2019, it's just now being published next year. So that's, a full 5, 6 years between the time when I was writing it, there wasn't even a pandemic. So just
yeah.
so much has changed since that time. So
Wow.
it's a long time away. Yeah, for sure.
Now, for that, let's talk about that one for a second. With such a big gap, did you have to go in and make changes, or how it
Um,
was?
I
Did the
kind of
publisher
made
accept it?
changes. They did, yeah. I was kind of lucky because it was science fiction and that kind of it was set in the
Okay.
future. So fortunately it wasn't set in modern day. So I think
Yeah.
that helped me. But I did kind of go back and change it because over 5 years I learned a lot as a writer. I think my writing has changed.
Right.
So I kind of went back and fixed the little mistakes that I didn't know I was making at the time. So
Hmm.
I did a few little changes and then I gave it to them.
Okay.
So hopefully all goes well for next year.
Yeah, that's pretty that's awesome though. I love to hear. I've got a book, so I'm self-publishing books now under my own brand, and I've got one coming out at the end of this year, and it's one that I had written years ago.
Yeah.
And so I've been diving in this year because I've changed as a writer from when I first wrote
Mhm.
that. Um it's interesting to go look at what you wrote several years back and
Yeah,
be like, man, I'm making the same stupid mistake over and over again. And then I'm
exactly.
fixing it. And then of course part of my brain's going, but am I making a new mistake that I'm not catching?
Exactly. And then in 5 years, you'll see the mistake, and then it's too late. So it's just this endless cycle of making a mistake, fixing it, and making another one, and it just
Right.
never ends
Well,
till the end
fortunately,
of
like
time.
with that one, I have a really good editor,
Yeah,
and it will. I expect that. Yeah, I'm sure something slips through the cracks, but as a
yeah,
general rule, once that gets to the editor by that point, but I try to, you hate to give someone something riddled with mistakes. So what I give, I want to have it as clean as I can. Also, before the editor will get it, about a month before I send it to the editor,
hmm
I'll have beta readers go over it.
yeah. That's a good
So
idea.
I want to have it as clean as possible for them because I don't want the response from them back is like, okay, page two, third paragraph, this line, do this. Fourth
Yeah,
line, do this. Sixth line, do this. But like, oh my goodness, no. So as clean as possible before they get it. Just and I always tell them when I've used them in the past, hey, unless the grammar is just like gross negligence,
hmm
I don't care. I'm paying someone to fix that, and I'll be
yeah,
fixing it after you even have it. Um,
exactly.
I need these things. I need to know about consistency for characters, setting.
hmm
Does it flow? Is there something in there that you're like, wait, hold on, didn't she have green eyes last chapter? How are they
Yeah,
blue? And I did do that in one of the last books.
yeah.
Someone
I've
was
done
like,
that too.
and then what was the other one? Oh, one of my early readers said, um, all the women have ponytails in one spot or another, and I'm and they're like, you must have a thing about ponytails. Maybe you don't want to express it in every
Maybe.
character, and I'm just like, I
Oh
have.
no.
So I of course start googling pony, or I do a find search and
Right.
replace through ponytails, and I'm like, son of a gun, there's a lot of ponytails in there. It's like, what was I
Yeah.
thinking? It's like, I don't know. So
Crazy. Yeah,
one of them
we
got to
do
keep
we
the
do all kinds
ponytails.
of weird things as writers. Like one time I was writing and I just for some reason just dropped one character completely. They just vanished.
They
And in the
vanished.
second draft, I was like, okay, you have to write them back in. For some
Yeah.
reason they disappeared. I don't know why. I guess I just forgot about them. But yeah, so those first drafts, they should never be seen by anybody ever again.
No, but they're so important. To me, the first
Yeah.
drafts, it, at first, when I first started writing, that was where the most excitement was. Once I
Yeah.
got to type the end, and
Mhm.
the first couple books, when I typed the end, I really did in my brain thought, that's it. That's the story. This shouldn't have to be changed. This is here comes the dump truck in the driveway to start dumping the cash. And
Yeah.
no, it was just a dump truck that was picking up trash. It was
Yeah.
not, there was no none of that happening. But and I think I did a social media post about it this weekend. Because it kind of was one of the things that it reminded me is I used to hate editing. Like it was torture for me. And it wasn't there was no ego involved is joking about the trash can or the dump truck thing.
Mhm.
There wasn't an ego thinking if I write it, it has to be the word of God. It has to be
Right.
this is it. This is what is that. No, it wasn't that. It
Mhm.
was it was so I hated going back through it and trying to pick it apart.
Yeah, that's
So
the hard part.
I would make myself edit, but I wouldn't enjoy it. And then
Mhm.
after multiple books and after years of doing that, and just learning a lot about the process, I started to see the beauty in the editing.
Yeah.
And it just that it took a while for those connections to take place for me. I'm a slow learner, so it took a while for me to figure out. Okay, the other thing too that I had to accept is I struggled for a while of if I'm editing a book,
Mhm.
I'm no longer writing, and all I'm an editor, and that really bothered me because I
Yeah.
didn't want to be an editor. I wanted to be a writer for years.
Mhm.
And then as I started doing it for a while, I realized no, in the course of the editing process, you're making sometimes a lot of changes. And
Yeah.
you're rewriting entire paragraphs
Mhm.
or complete pages of dialogue. And so
Yeah.
I basically maybe I just tricked my brain or lied to myself, but I'm like, no,
Mhm.
see, you're still a writer. You're writing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just did that today when I finished edits with my editor for the fantasy romance. I completely rewrote the first page, so it's a completely different opener. While I was editing it, I'm also rewriting it. So
Yeah.
it goes hand in hand for sure.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Again, it's one of these things that you can start doing and the fulfillment that comes out of it and what you're going to learn. So often with jobs, especially if you don't know what you do for if during the day, if you have another job that you're doing that's mundane. Mine kind of is. It's a good
Yeah.
job, but it can be mundane.
It is.
So
Yeah.
the beauty of the writing process is you get to create, and
Exactly.
there's of course can be a mundane part. To me, the editing was the mundane piece. That's why I
Yeah.
think I hated it so much because it was just like this is so I'm not creating.
Yeah.
Again, now my perspective has changed, and that's where a lot of I think that's where you can find a lot of joy in the process too, is
Mhm.
if you kind of take the blinders off and look and take step back and
Yeah.
look at it, look at how you can fix it. But that creative part of it is to me so rewarding, and
Yeah. Yeah.
especially if you don't have that. So for people that don't write or don't create music or woodworking, painting, whatever it might be, if you don't have a creative outlet, I think you're missing out. And I know some people like I know a lot of people that aren't writers and they have no joy in it and they don't want to do it, and I totally respect that. But I would, maybe fishing is your thing. It's not. I don't know that I would view it as creative, but
Yeah.
I
Certainly
think
fun, I guess.
it can be rewarding for people.
Yeah.
So find something, but try to find something that's not in front of the television and find something with your time that I always joke about the phones because I'm a
Yeah.
huge I'm on my phone way too much, but it's like
Yeah.
these things have changed our entire culture, basically.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I was actually on this weekend with someone from England, and I asked him, I was like, "Do you see lots of couples at dinner over?" And I was just there, so I kind of
Hmm.
remember seeing people holding a phone. I was over there about a year and a half ago. But I was just like, man, I noticed here, and I'd be curious. I guess I should ask you because you're in Canada, which
Yeah.
I know we're both in basically the same country. It's just there's
Yeah.
a
Oh,
line
yeah.
there. But if you're out and you go to dinner or you're out in even the park, a lot of times you'll see people like people sitting on park benches. What are they
Yeah.
doing? They're not looking out at the mountain. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting on their phone.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like I want to like yell. And of course, I want to yell, and I got a phone in my hand half the time. So I was like, well,
Yeah.
they'll probably hit me for being a total hypocrite.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's damaged us as a society, honestly. I
It
think
has. Yeah.
it's definitely hurt us from a creative standpoint. I know for me personally, I've had to at night now because I do most of my editing and writing in the evenings normally. I get
Hmm.
sometimes during the day, but I have a day job, I have kids, so
Yeah.
normally either on the weekends I don't have my kids or the evenings is my kind of my dedicated writing time.
Hmm.
But I'll go put my phone in the other room.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a smart idea. Yeah.
because it's such a distraction.
Yeah.
Now, what I found is inevitably I have to research something, and that's what I would convince myself for a while.
Yeah.
Well, keep the phone near you though, so you can look stuff up, and then after a while of then jumping on and going, oh, let me just check Twitter, or oh, let
Yeah.
me do this, or what are my
Or
views on the podcast, or whatever stupidity I'm filling my brain with instead of writing.
yeah.
I finally connected the dots, and it's like, oh yeah, the computer I'm typing this on has Windows Explorer right there and Chrome.
Exactly.
I can do my research from
Exactly.
Google there as well.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was
This I even try to keep my phone like across the room because I know I'm not going to get up and get it. Like I'm too lazy to get up and go reach for it. So if I just put it as far as possible where I can't reach, then I should be good. I can kind of break the addiction that I have to it.
That's funny. The other thing
Yeah.
I started, it's funny you say that too, because the other thing I started doing about a year ago is, and I read lots of different stuff for storylines and I try to keep technology stuff. And I was reading these like really negative articles about phones and cancer and how
Mm.
bad they are. Like, because the average person will, sleep on their bed and they're on their pillow and then on their nightstand, which, you don't even have to full reach, there would
Yeah.
be their phone. And they're like, that going out in your brain all night long is
Mhm.
not good for you. So they're like, don't, and the some of the stuff I read said, don't even keep it in the bedroom at all. And then I
Uh,
was like, well, my kids aren't with me half the time. And if there's an emergency, if the phone's on the other side of the house, I'll never hear it. So
exactly.
I kind of negotiated with myself, and it's on the far end of the room. I
Mm,
can't reach it. I have to get it's intentional. So and it also makes me when the alarm goes off in the morning, you've got to get up to turn the
you have to
alarm
get
off.
up.
'Cause I despise alarms. So
Yes.
they're not like I'll just roll over and just sleep through. It's like no, I will not fall back to sleep. So but yeah, I just keep it as far from me, and I even do it at night. Like when I'm done writing and before I'm ready to go to bed, I immediately go and plug it in. Because
Yeah.
the other thing I found for a while is I'd go jump in bed, and especially when the phone was right there next to me, I just
Hmm.
pick it up and I just start flipping around with my thumb, and before I know it, it's been like 90 minutes,
Yeah.
and it's just
It's
like, oh, I got to get
time
up
goes
and
by so fast.
I got to get up in 5 hours for work or 6 hours for work. It's
Yeah.
like this doesn't. So I've tried to just, and I'm not great at it yet, but
Yeah.
having it on the other side of the room has made that's easy. Once
It
it's
does.
there, I don't get up and go, let me just get up and check something. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's someone will call, you'll hear the alarm go off. So, although
Exactly.
I think I got it muted. I think my ringer's off. My ringer's probably been off for 6 months. So my kids will always be like, I tried calling you, Dad. And I was like,
Oh
I was in the
no.
kitchen. I didn't have the phone next to me. So
Oh no. Yeah, my dad's exactly like that too. Doesn't respond to texts. He's got his phone somewhere else in the house. I'm like, nice. Can't even get into touch with you. So
So talk about what's coming out. So you said you have what, 12, 12, 10, 12 book deals coming up?
I have yes, so 10 book deals coming out
Wow.
from now to 2026. So I'm kind of
Okay.
booked for like 2-ish years and kind of hoping to keep writing sequels after that time, but we'll see what happens, I guess, with the book sales and what the publishers say.
What type all different genres still for those?
Yes, all different genres. So one's horror, one is YA fantasy, another is YA sci-fi. There's one coming out next year that is mystery that's set in the 1920s. It's called Murder at the Cabaret. So
Okay.
that one, yeah, and I was told that one should actually have bookstore distribution. So I'm actually really looking forward to
Yeah.
walking into my local bookstore and seeing it on the shelf. So that is really exciting.
Yeah, I've so when my debut came out in November of 2021, and smaller publisher, so distribution was mainly there was it was in online, and there's a few other locations that have it, but not like Barnes and Noble or anything like that. And
Yeah.
I actually that was what I tried to do was I tried to go to a lot of the local bookstores and
Hmm.
see if they'd carry it. And I was surprised how much kickback I got actually of they would
Yeah.
not or oh, we'll consign it for you. You buy it or this and that.
Hmm.
And I hate to say it because I'm a supporter of small bookstores, but it was too much of a hassle. So I
It is.
kind of just at that point was like, you know what? And I've even tried this with my latest release. I've taken kind of view it as promotion. I've taken a few copies, author copies that I bought myself, and I've sent them to some local bookstores,
Hmm.
especially some of the bigger ones that kind of get a lot of the political thriller, those type of
Right.
people that come through, and just said, "Hey, here's a couple books. Sell them. It's your money. I don't want a
Hmm.
dime. If they sell, though, carry them for me."
Yeah.
Um, I not even heard back from them, so I'm just kind of like, well, darn. I mean, that might because and that was something that someone had told me a while ago. Hey, just try sending it. Don't send out 100 copies, but
Yeah.
send out a half dozen copies. It can't hurt. Um, so far, I'm not getting much response on that. So it's like, well, I don't think I will. I don't think I will try that route again. So
Maybe it's so good that they're just blown away. They just don't know what to say. They're just speechless. I
you make up stories for a living, don't you?
I do.
So, well,
That's what I'd be telling myself. Yeah, for sure.
the crazy thing about it is I've sold a lot of books, and I mean they're like I get really good ratings and reviews, and I have like high numbers, especially for like small published, self-published. My numbers are really good, so it's not that. It's just I don't know. I don't know what the breakdown, why that happens. Um, but I'm like, okay. And I don't look at it as a negative and go, well, I'll never
Mhm.
work with you guys again. No, it's nothing like
Yeah,
that. But I'm not going to waste copies though.
exactly.
So it's like I'll
Yeah.
just wait until I've kind of gotten at a different level or
Mhm.
um I've not given up on the idea of traditional publishing. The more I've learned about it, the more it sounds weird to say it, but the more I'm going to need to be convinced it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because
True. Yeah.
that was the one thing that I found very interesting is even going with the smaller publisher for my first release,
Hmm.
then going indie. The financial differences between those was dramatic
Yeah.
in my favor for doing it myself versus going through
Hmm.
the smaller publisher. And I wasn't expecting it to be that dramatic.
Yeah.
And it basically put that mindset of, wow, why would I go back? Not that why would I go back to a small publisher? There definitely would be reasons to do it, but
Yeah, for sure.
it would be very specific things. I wouldn't
Hmm.
do it unless I felt comfortable that it would be worth it. Or maybe they're like you were saying with the book being available there in like a brick and mortar store.
Hmm.
Okay, that's a reason to do it.
Exactly.
I don't fly all the time, but I do fly on a somewhat regular basis. And I definitely have a bucket list thing of I want to go into, bookstores or,
Yeah.
the what Hudson News places and the airports. And I want to see my book there.
Yeah.
And
That's a dream for
the
sure.
likelihood of that happening, through indie or even a small publisher is hovering around 0%. We'll say
Yeah.
it's under 1% for hope purposes,
Yeah,
but it's very unlikely. So
it is.
that would be a reason where not just even going traditional, but going traditional with a larger publisher would
Hmm.
pretty much be required at that point.
Yeah, yeah. If that's your ultimate goal, then for sure. But for me, I was kind of attracted to small indie publishers because they're the ones who are hiring the editors and they're doing the book covers. And sometimes I don't want to do all that stuff. Like I just want to write the book. So
Yeah.
they were taking on that financial responsibility and they were doing it for me. So that was why I was kind of drawn to them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that people, and you've probably now have experienced enough too that, and I try to, um, not warn people in a negative way, but I guess yes, warn them in negative ways. Be careful because you can have an organization out there that calls themselves a publisher that
Hmm.
says, "Hey, send us your manuscript and we'll publish your book." But what's the fine line there? Watch for the fine lines because I know people that have spent, not exaggerating,
That's
thousands of
crazy.
dollars for one book to come out.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't know about it until after the fact. One particular person I'm thinking of, and it's just like now that I've done now that I've done indie myself, and I know the costs. I mean, I do
Hmm.
finance anyways. It's my 9 to 5 job, so I'm numbers oriented.
Hmm.
So I know exactly how much I make on every book. I know the costs of
Yeah.
what it is to buy them for authors. I even know how many books I have to sell a month to quit my day job.
Wow.
And I
You're
even
doing the
told my
math.
boss that
Okay.
recently. My boss is a great guy. He's a believer in me. He's joked multiple times in the last few years, especially as the hey, there we go. We have a celebrity.
Oh
So,
my God. Tammy. There
but my
we go.
boss has joked and said, so when future New York Times bestseller, when you quitting? And I go, ha ha ha. Now that I'm publishing books, let me tell you,
Yeah,
keep pay,
exactly.
keep paying me for a while, buddy. So, but
Exactly.
I did the numbers to see how many books would I have to sell every month to quit my day job. And I have told a few people what the number is, but I will not put it online because it's depressing. It's
Yeah.
not a small number. And it's just,
Hmm.
and that's me being the publisher getting, obviously I have to pay for a cover, pay for editor and all that, but
Exactly.
that's all factored into that.
Hmm.
That's me getting 100% of the royalties though.
Yeah.
Yes, I get all the costs, but I can, if I offset them, I keep all the profit. Now
Hmm.
I'm not getting 15% or 30% royalties. I'm getting the full royalties, and the amount of books I have to sell is crazy. It's
It
crazy.
is. Yeah,
It's crazy.
for sure. Yeah. And that comes with like self-publishing the drawbacks and you get 100% of the profits, but you have to do all of this all of the marketing and you have to do your own
Right.
cover and you have to do this. So sometimes I kind of like to go back and forth when I've kind of had enough of the self promo. I go to my
Sure.
publisher and then on days when I feel like doing it, then I self-publish. So I'd like to kind of mix it up now and then.
Have you done for your books, and I don't know with your genre because I know my genre really well when it comes to sales and all the other stuff, but have you done Kindle Unlimited at all?
I haven't.
You
No, I
haven't.
don't
Okay.
think so. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was an interesting thing to break into. So again, I mentioned earlier in the podcast David Darling. David got me linked in with it as well. Basically, it's they users pay a monthly fee in any books that are in that Kindle Unlimited program, they can read
Hmm.
as many as they want a month.
Okay.
And there's I'm going to say the word millions loosely,
Hmm.
but there's tons of books on there, and some of
Okay.
them by very, not, and it's not just self-published authors either. There's big name authors that have books on there as
Hmm.
well. Um, and then the kickback for the author is you get somewhere, don't know if it's a penny per every 3 pages. I forget exactly what the breakdown is. You get about a third of what would you would get if you sold your ebook just regular.
Hmm.
So you're getting something, but you're not getting as much. But it's
Right.
the program does advertising, and so I
Okay.
jumped into that earlier back in January when I got the publisher for my first series went out of business, so I got the rights back, and
Right.
which I had already set up my own entity at that point. I had already put something out under my own entity. So then I just had to
Mhm.
decide, um, do I try to take that series and go somewhere else?
Right.
Or since it sold really well and it's been successful, but not successful enough to probably get like a big publisher interested, but
Yeah.
definitely successful from a publishing standpoint, especially for indie. Do I just do it in house and do it myself? And
Mhm.
I decided to do that route, and then I put the book on Kindle Unlimited based
Hmm.
on conversations I had had with David,
Yeah.
and it started getting page reads, and I was like, okay, this is great. Um, the exponential growth in those page reads, though, is what's surprising to me. Like, I think the first month I had like 50, and it's hard to know unless you look at them, but it's like 15,000 page reads.
Wow. Okay.
So that would be, hold on, I do have a calculator right here. So 15,000 page reads would roughly, because you can kind of figure it out based on your how many pages are in your book. So that's basically
Mhm.
like 42 book reads. Now,
Okay.
people could read 3 pages and stop reading, or 100 pages and stop reading. So it's not that those people all read your entire book, but if you
Right.
combine it all together, um, okay, so I had like 42 book reads. Okay, that's pretty good. Well, in June, late June, I put out the sequel to that book. Sold really well. My pre-orders were really high, so very impressive. I think my Kindle Unlimited numbers for not June, for July, I guess. So the next month when both of them been out for the full month was like
Hmm.
280,000 page reads. So that's
Yeah.
800 book reads. So you go from
That's
January, I
crazy.
had 42 book reads to
Yeah. The
then
growth.
literally 6, 7 months later, 800. And this month, or what, the 12th, we're filming this on the 12th of August. I'm on
Mhm.
pace to basically be that or more for August over July. And that's
Crazy.
only with two out there. So, and I do have a novella out there as well, but the novella gets like the smallest percentage. It gets a couple thousand page reads, but it doesn't get very much.
Hmm.
Um, but it's been again, it's another thing that it's a revenue source for you because that
Yes.
money
Yeah.
just comes straight from Kindle. And then also the interesting thing about that, because I was kind of against it at first, but I try to
Mhm.
introduce it to people, especially for their own stuff, because my first concern when I was talking to David about it is like, well, I'd rather get full price and have someone buy the ebook than go read it on Kindle Unlimited and only get a third of the money. I'm a businessman now and I'm being greedy, which
Of
I'm not
course.
being greedy, but and he kind of really helped along with it and helped shape my mindset is you got to remember, if someone's paying a monthly fee to Kindle Unlimited,
Hmm.
there's a good chance they're not buying ebooks or anything because why would they? They're paying this fee to read these books. So you
Hmm.
have two different markets. You have the markets of people that are going to go buy your ebook, your paperback, and your hardcover,
Hmm.
and through Kindle or Barnes and Noble, wherever you have them.
Yeah.
And then you have this market for the Kindle Unlimited, and there is a delineating mark, which is they're behind that
Yeah.
paywall over there. So for you to offer your books there, why not try it? See if it makes you money.
Exactly.
And it has, and it's been pretty. I think I made more in Kindle Unlimited this year than I did with the traditional publisher.
That's crazy.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's again, but it's all those things you end up having to learn. And
Yeah.
I know I think from just our conversation we've had and from my backstory is I didn't want to do any of this stuff. I just wanted to tell
Yeah.
stories. Um,
Exactly.
but then the reality kicks in of guess what?
Yeah.
Everything changed with the digital age. The digital
Oh
age
yeah.
changed everything.
Yeah.
And so you've got to like even and, people that do go traditional or want to go traditional, they go, I just want to write a book, sit back
Yeah.
and write the next book. And it's like, not gonna happen. Not
No.
gonna happen. They're gonna make
Yeah.
you come on and talk with me on the podcast.
They
And you're
will.
you're going to have to sound like you can have a coherent conversation with a human being and sell your
Complete
book.
torture. Complete torture, really.
Complete torture. Is this torture?
No.
Okay. Be honest with me.
No,
It's
no.
okay, Dana.
I have some author friends that have big traditional book deals and they still have to do all of this. They still have to
Yeah.
do marketing meetings and Zoom calls. So I mean, you have to wear so many different hats as a writer. It's not just the books. Like
Yeah,
there's so much to it. So yeah,
absolutely. But
you
that's
learn
okay.
that way.
We still what the beauty of it though is we're getting to do what we want to do. We're getting to tell our stories, and if you it's one of those things where I think I heard author Brad Thor say it, and I don't know if Brad got it from someone else as well, but they said the statement basically was um, the only difference between a published author and an unpublished author is the published author didn't quit.
Yeah,
And that's the kind of the mark there of people go, man, I just how am I going to get published? It's like I don't know how you're going to get published, but I know how you're not going to get published. Give up.
exactly. Yeah. And for me, I think I was just so stubborn that I just wasn't gonna quit until I saw my book in my hands. So I think that really kind of fueled me. Like everyone in my family is incredibly stubborn, so I think that trait
It's
really helped.
genetic.
Yeah, it is. It is very much genetic. Yeah, for sure.
That's too funny. But that's the way you succeed though.
Yeah.
Um man, it's I was talking to someone this weekend about it. I was out with a friend for dinner and he said, "Hey, can this other person come?" I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem. You know, the more the merrier." So someone I had never met before and it was a fascinating. We sat there, we actually had dinner and then we went across the street to a cigar bar. Anyone out there that
Nice.
doesn't like cigars, sorry. I do indulge every
Hmm.
couple times a year, six a year maybe. But we sat in this cigar bar for about 2.5 hours,
Wow.
and he basically got into franchising a food establishment.
Hmm.
Um, and we had time. We were sitting there smoking cigars, drinking water, just chilling. And I
Yeah.
was like, man, tell me about it. Tell me how it worked. And we just sat there and he kind of laid out all the steps and the difficulties and all that. But
Yeah.
as he's telling me his story and as he's sharing with me, I'm like, can I tell you what I've gotten out of this? He goes, yeah, absolutely. I was like, one word comes to mind with everything you just said: persistence.
Yeah.
You stuck with it. And now he's in a
Yeah.
position where I think he's looking to, within the next 3 years, I think he's going to try to have five of these franchises under him.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
It's incredible.
and the first one came close to failing, came close to, you're risking everything. And I
Yeah.
even said to him, I was like, yeah, for me, the writing, I didn't have that experience because I didn't have to risk very much. Um,
Exactly.
the only thing I was given away, gave up, which honestly is the most valuable commodity we have in our life, is time. Um,
Exactly.
but I didn't have to like mortgage, you're talking about mortgaging your house or something. I mean, some people have done some pretty amazing things to be financially successful in their business.
Hmm.
Didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was encouraging conversation. And it was encouraging though because you saw someone that was passionate about something
Hmm.
and stuck with it and they reached their goal and their goals are constantly moving. And so for like you, I'll have a last question for you, but before we get there, what are your goals? Where do you have like a plan of where you want to be, or are you just let's get as many books out as we can, or is there a
I
master
think
plan, Dana?
I think I used to have a plan and then I kind of went with it and the plans kind of went away. But I think for me,
Okay.
it's just write more books, try to get more readers, and just do what you love day in, day out. I stopped setting like huge goals for myself so I wouldn't get disappointed. It's really more just do what you love and just keep going with it. Don't let rejection stop you.
Yeah, no, it's said beautifully. I've still
Yeah.
have a list of goals. I haven't looked at them in a while. It's funny though, last time I looked at them, how some of them do change. Like I had, and it's still on there, and I won't take it off. But one of them was I want to be a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
Because again, back to what we were talking about earlier, I was very ignorant to how the business worked, and I
Mhm.
always assumed, growing up and reading books over the years, that well, the New York Times bestseller is the best-selling book of that particular week.
Yeah.
Uh, here's the big news for everyone watching and listening. It's not true. It's not true. You
No.
might be the biggest selling book. You
Yeah.
might not though, because there's all these other nuances and layers of what gets a
Oh
book
yeah.
into the New York Times bestseller list, and it's not just sales.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, then that I won't say it cheapened it for me because that's not fair because I would still love, Eric Bishop, New York Times bestseller is that's got a good ring to it and I'll market the
It
heck
does.
out of it. But do I have to have that now to feel fulfilled like I might have 10 years ago when I started writing? No, absolutely not. Because I know like the publishing industry, it's extremely subjective thing.
Yeah,
It's not
for sure.
necessarily actually the more I read about it, the USA Today bestseller list is a better gauge because it is
It is. Yeah.
strictly based on sales numbers.
Hmm.
So so alter your goals. Maybe you want to be a New York Times or not New York Times bestseller. You want to be a USA Today bestseller. So,
Exactly.
which I'm surprised the USA Today is even still in existence. I don't even
Yeah.
know if they have papers anymore, do they?
No, no, I don't think so. No, I
It
think it's
might
one
be
that's coming up.
digital. It might be
Yeah,
digital. So,
everything is digital today for sure.
so we're talking in August, and this will probably come out in early September. What's coming out for the end of the year for you? What's next on your docket?
I have a it's called Modern Fairy Tale. It's a romantic fantasy novel that is coming out November 19th.
Okay.
And I do have a young adult mystery coming out. Not sure of the date for that yet,
Okay.
but hopefully a few projects. Things are kind of still in the air. They're still in the editing process, but
Mhm.
Modern Fairy Tale is the number one thing. I definitely know that's coming out. So I've been working really hard on those books. I'm really proud of those. So I'm really
Awesome.
excited for November.
Well, good for you. Keep doing it. Keep writing. And it's time for the final question, which I guess kind of is deep. It's
Okay.
interesting how people take this one. So I think you'd agree with me that life is like a book. We have a first
Yes.
page, we have a last page. There's pages in between those, and we don't know how many pages there's going to be. So, but as a writer and as someone who writes like tons of different genres and all kinds of styles, you
Mhm.
get to write what's on that last page. What does that last page say for Dana?
Oh my gosh, such a loaded question.
Such a softball. I teed up the biggest bouncy ball that you can just knock with your fingers. Come on now.
I think I'll go cheesy and just be like, she lived happily ever after doing what she loved, writing. The end.
No one has said that, so that's a great answer. Actually, it's funny. I've like there's been a little consistency because you're like interview number 26, 25. I don't know. Almost
Oh,
been doing this for almost half a year now, I guess.
yeah,
But it's been interesting. I keep thinking I'm going to drop the question because I'm like people are probably sick of hearing it, and I'm always if no one's watched, which is probably very much the case, the authors haven't watched an episode, so they don't have a
yeah,
clue that it's coming. And I almost feel like it's a cheap shot, but it's like no, it kind of gives you that moment of like, wait, and for some people, I think that they might think or they immediately just spout out.
yeah.
Um,
You just
I've had
gotta
a
go
couple
for it.
like to be continued, and I've had a few like
Nice.
that were in that
Yeah,
vein too. And I'm just like, no, there's no. And a couple people like, I don't know, and I'm like, there's no wrong answer here. There's no wrong
exactly.
answer. You're not getting graded on this. Whatever you say, we're not just gonna etch it into your tombstone. There's nothing like that that's
Yeah,
happening. So
yeah,
someone early on said they wanted to be I want to be sitting they took it more of literal of like, I want to be sitting on the front porch watching my grandkids play in the yard and I just keel over in the rocking chair and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's your last
yeah,
page then."
yeah,
Nothing wrong with that. Live to be a
yeah,
good old age, but
exactly.
um I know I want to keep writing
Yeah,
and I hope I get to keep the mental faculties to allow me to do it till I'm
yes.
not doing anything else.
Hmm.
Because it's fun. And I think early on I put too much expectations of it has to pay the bills. It has to
Yeah,
be, I have to get the Netflix deal and I have to do all that. And I
yeah,
still have goals and they're ambitious goals. Um, but I've accomplished the biggest thing was I set out to write a novel and I finished it
yeah. And
and I
that's a
completed it.
huge accomplishment.
That is a
So,
massive
yeah.
accomplishment. And then it took doing that three more times, the
Hmm.
fourth novel before it was good enough in someone's eyes to publish.
Yeah,
And now I
yeah,
think I'm on number 8. So I'm just you keep and you just keep hustling, you keep moving. And the joy that I get from sitting down each night hasn't changed. I will admit, and I'm curious of this. We asked the last question, but
yeah,
I will admit that when I held my first book, it was one of those memories that's etched in my brain, and I can
yeah.
still almost reach back and feel the emotion I felt. Um, it doesn't feel the same with 2, 3, 4 will be coming here soon, and by the end of the year, um, it is different. It is changes.
It
It's
is.
still amazing,
It
but
is. Yeah.
it is less amazing. for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
Yeah, it'll never compare to the joy of like the first book of knowing all the things that you overcame to get to that part,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the amazing thing though is that's not all it's about. So you get to keep
Exactly.
doing it and yeah, just getting to type the word the end is the joy. And I wish more people would do that.
Yeah.
I think people look at it as what it is. It's a very difficult process to write a book, but I think
Mhm.
more people can do it than give themselves credit for.
Exactly. Yeah. And you don't always have to try to get it published or show it to the world. It can just be your private accomplishment, just
Yeah.
something you do for you. So,
Something you do for you, or even something you do for your family, your kids,
yeah.
something you can leave behind. And I mentioned that in other podcasts, and I've said to people, it's like, if I, it's a broken record when I've said this, but my day job goes away tomorrow. There's no evidence. I mean, there's my lifestyle and what I've been able to have up to this point, but there's no physical, like, this was my job. It's all on a computer. It's all in a
Mhm.
corporation. It's gone. But my books are all here. So if something were to happen to me, my kids can pick up part of that and they can read that book because they
Yeah.
still haven't read my books. So, which they're not. Like, my daughter's 12. She shouldn't be reading my political thrillers. So
Yeah.
dad, she knows dad does put a few bad words in there, and, so she's not real old enough, but she has copies. I will say
Yeah.
they each get a hard copy
Good.
it's like and the funny thing was when the first book came out, I actually dedicated it to my mom, and
Uh,
both my kids gave me a hard time, and they're like, it's not dedicated to us. And I'm
oh
like,
no.
no, mom was my first supporter when it came to this and my
Exactly.
biggest supporter. And so they got the dedication in the second book. And you would think at that point, then it's like, rah, yay, dad. No, you get a kind of like, oh, yeah,
Oh,
really? Really? You didn't get the first one dedicated to you. And so now you get the second one. And what
oh
would
no.
you have done with the first one? You would have probably done the same thing. Oh, yeah. It's like,
That's too funny.
no, but so fortunately, I'm not writing books to let my kids boost my ego, because if so, good at popping
Be in the
dad's
gutter.
ego, that I
Yeah.
would be in the gutter. But no, it's such an amazing thing. So,
Yeah.
um, where should our listeners and people that watch this, where should they go to find out more about you, and more importantly, where should they go to buy one of those many books that are out there?
All my books are on Amazon, and also you can go on my website, which is just danagreeken.com, and all my books are listed there, and you can look through them and see which ones you like, and yeah, hopefully you'll read them and you'll really enjoy them.
Awesome. Well, Dana, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and especially for all the upcoming books in the next several years. You're an
Yeah,
inspiration to people, so
thank
keep,
you.
keep hustling, and we will be seeing more of your works out there.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.